Hi, today we're going to go through the Illuminated Edda, the latest book by Pendlehaven Publishing. At 630 pages, it is not a small book. The Illuminated Edda is an homage to the Viking Age. It includes both the prose and poetic Edda, which were both translated from Old Norse. The Poetic Edda was originally written down by anonymous authors. The main sources for the Poetic Edda are the Codex Regius, among other manuscripts like AM 748 that included poems like Grimnus Malahim Skavida. The prose Edda was written by Snorri Sturluson. The Illuminated Edda includes the two main manuscripts, the Gylfaginning and the Skaldskaparmal. The Vikings were fantastic explorers, and as such, they were exposed to a much broader worldview of cultures and religions. And they were extremely polytheistic and dynamic in terms of who they followed. Whenever they wanted to go off on a sailing expedition, they would leave an offering to Aegir or Njord. If they were going into war, they would leave an offering for Thor or Odin. In order to present a holistic view of what the Vikings would have experienced, other mythologies of adjacent times and places are included as well. So there's select books from the Celtic myths, such as the Lebor Galbala, which is the Book of Invasions, is included. The Welsh Mabinogion is touched upon. Some Baltic myths, Inuit myths, as well as Finnish stories from the Kalevala. Everything is woven together in an overarching narrative to give the reader an exciting view of the Viking Age. Like any world mythology, there's always contradictions and omissions. The author has about 25 years of studying Norse myths and has taken the liberty to create chapters that smooth over the gaps and fill in the inconsistencies within the text to be able to rationalize a seamless and cohesive Viking pantheon and world. Now, for the purists out there, chapters that are the direct translations from the original manuscripts are self-contained within chapters that are identified as being pure translations. The author's own stories only appear in other chapters that are marked with different types of borders and colored paper. The bibliography is actually really large and expansive. A lot of great authors have come before, such as Bellows, Bray, Crawford, Hollander, Larrington, Brodeur, Folks, Snorri, Saxo, and Björk. Now, the first thing that's going to start popping out as we're going through the Edda is the fantastic artwork. The superstars here are Sveta, Kevin, Natasha. They're all Fate of the Norns artists that have lent their work to creating some really fantastic products based on Viking myth. Their passion for the subject matter really shows through in their work. The stories are presented in a chronological order. At the beginning, there is Ginnungagap, the Great Void, and from its darkness emerged two worlds, Niflheim and Muspelheim, and the two worlds crash together, one of fire and one of ice, one of light and one of darkness, and from them spring all of the pantheons and all of the mythologies. Now we begin with the Celtic mythology because that is the most ancient tradition out of all of the ones that are being presented. We go through the creation myths, and then eventually we get to the birth of Buri and Ymir, the first god and the first giant. All of these stories are presented in incremental fashion, so even if you don't have any background in Norse myths or Viking history, you can follow along right from the beginning. And in case you're overwhelmed by the sheer number of characters that appear in these mythologies, there's a very helpful glossary at the back of the book that lists pretty much everyone that shows up. Much like the structure of the Poetic Edda, the Illuminated Edda has a beginning that deals with the divinities, the higher powers. And then we descend into the creation of mankind and their epic tales. So in the second half of the book, you find more of the tales about the heroes, Sigurd, the Volsung-Nibelung feud, Helgi Hundingsbani, and Hedrick the Wise. That poem hasn't been translated since 1960 when it was translated by Christopher Tolkien. So it's a very nice renewal of a very amazing tale about Agantir and the legendary sword Tyrfing. Within 630 pages, the Illuminated Edda has space to do deep dive character explorations for some of your favorites. Now, I'm not going to provide any spoilers, but I can tell you that some of the characters that do get a deep dive are maybe predictable ones, like Loki and Odin, but then you'll be surprised, pleasantly surprised, about some of the other characters that were chosen for really deep backstory and character development. It should come as no surprise that in Viking history and culture, women were very empowered. And within the Illuminated Edda, you will see many interesting female leads like Gudrun, Brynhild, Svava. These characters drive the plot lines not only in the official chapters, but also in a lot of those filler chapters. In fact, Valkyries are explored in depth in the second half of the Illuminated Edda. If you're already familiar with some of the stories and sagas and tales that are presented in the existing bodies of work, and had certain storylines drop off without any satisfying conclusions, well, you should definitely tune into the Illuminated Edda. Pretty much all of those stories get very satisfying conclusions within the pages of this tome. Now, like you'd probably imagine, the book ends with a chapter called Ragnarok, and then you're hit with a surprise epilogue, which I won't ruin in this book review. Now, some of the wonderful poems in the Poetic Edda had contradictory stories that could not fit within the overarching narrative of the Illuminated Edda, but in terms of keeping the Poetic Edda complete, they have been included in the appendix at the end of the book. Then we hit the glossary. Now, the glossary is mandatory for a body of work that has so many characters and so many plot lines. And so the main characters, actually almost all the characters, appear in this extended glossary with a short blurb about who they are and where they appear, with a small reference as well if they're in an official chapter or an official translation. The reference will be called out. The glossary is also broken down by the mythologies, so if you're curious to learn more about the characters, about Celtic or Baltic or Finnish or Inuit myths, they appear in their own glossaries. We also snuck in a little game that uses the Futhark rune set, where you and your friends and family can sit around and play a storytelling game that's both collaborative and competitive. And lastly, well, the absolutely mandatory index. So every character, every magic item, every place is referenced, that's referenced in the glossary, is also referenced in the index with a page listing wherever they appear within the book. I think you'll find that this is a very complete and comprehensive book for any Viking lover, and it was put together with great love from the entire team. So hopefully you'll check it out, and thanks for watching.